Here we go. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Mr. Pad Paramahansa Kuruksetra Ashtotar to Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Kuruksetra Ashtotar to Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. So this is actually Shiva Ratri tonight. You know that, right? Yeah. Because according to the sun, the titis and everything. Yeah, that's what counts. In India, it was yesterday. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Okay. On this first day of March 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 2 entitled Contents of the Gita Summarized, text 32 on page 100. Yadvichaya chopapannam swagadvaram apavritam Sukina kṣatriya partha labante yudhamidrisham yadrichaya chopapannam swagadvaram apavritam Sukina kṣatriya partha labante yudhamidrisham Yadrichaya chopapannam swagadvaram apavritam Sukina kṣatriya partha labante yudhamidrisham Yadrichaya chopapannam swagadvaram apavritam Sukina kṣatriya partha labante yudhamidrisham Yadrichaya chopapannam swagadvaram apavritam Sukina kṣatriya partha labante yudhamidrisham Yadrichaya chopapannam swagadvaram apavritam Sukina kṣatriya partha labante yudhamidrisham. Zoomland. Nobody. Yadrichaya by its own accord. Cha also upapannam arrived at swarga of the heavenly planets, dwaram door, apavritam wide open, Sukinaha, very happy, kṣatriyaha, the members of the royal order, partha, O son of Pritha, labante, do achieve, yudham, war, idrisham, like this. Krishna said to Arjuna, O partha, happy are the kṣatriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come unsought, opening for them the doors of the heavenly planets. Purport. As Supreme Teacher of the world, Lord Krishna condemns the attitude of Arjuna, who said, I do not find any good in the fighting. It will cause perpetual habitation in hell. Such statements by Arjuna were due to ignorance only. He wanted to become non-violent in the discharge of his specific duty. For a kṣatriya to be on the battlefield and to become non-violent is the philosophy of fools. In the Parashara Smriti, or religious codes made by Parashara, the great sage and father of Vyasadeva, it is stated, Kṣatriyo hi praja rakshan shastrapani padandayan nirjitya padasainyadi chitim dharmena palayet. The Kṣatriya's duty is to protect the citizens from all kinds of difficulties. And for that reason, he has to apply violence in suitable cases for law and order. Therefore, he has to conquer the soldiers of inimical kings, and thus, with religious principles, he should rule over the world. Considering all aspects, Arjuna had no reason to refrain from fighting. If he should conquer his enemies, he would enjoy the kingdom. And if he should die in the battle, he would be elevated to the heavenly planets, whose doors were wide open to him. Fighting would be for his benefit in either case. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakiyat Chakshu Udmridatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara. So this is a little interlude, if you will, in which Krishna is giving standard kṣatriya talk and encouragement to Arjuna. This fighting opportunity that Arjuna is now hesitating to perform, he says is come unsought. In other words, by the force of providence, Arjuna, this is the way Krishna is presenting it in this particular verse. Arjuna has been given this opportunity to fight on the side of good and virtue and dharma, and it opens wide the doors to the heavenly planets, as opposed to what he was thinking, which is that if I kill all these men, the women will become unprotected, the children become corrupted, they'll become misguided, plus the Shraddha ceremonies won't be performed, and I'll be responsible. And so he was seeing the doors to hell opening up, and Krishna says, no, this is the Swargadwaram Aparvatam, the doors to heaven opening up. So he's contradicting him. He's defeating him on every level. In other words, on the basic level of spiritual ignorance, which Arjuna is showing. And here, even from the material side, his hesitating to fight makes no sense. Because the whole purpose of the war, as reiterated again and again, was to reinstitute Dharma in the world, which was threatened by Dhritarashtra and his sons and their attempt to usurp the kingdom. And we can see how ruthless they were. They tried to assassinate the boys in so many different ways to avoid this battle, but just to get the kingdom that way. So this is an argument, and in the purport here, Prabhupada quotes from the Parashara Smriti how the duty of the Kshatriya is to protect the citizens from all kinds of difficulties. So if Arjuna leaves the battlefield and the Kurus prevail, then they will not be protected as well as if the Pandavas are leading the society. And so for the sake of the citizens in general, Arjuna should fight. And that's actually what happened. I mean, when Yudhishthira, actually he was really crestfallen, devastated by all the blood that was spilled and all the thousands and millions of warriors, and also the animals, the elephants and the horses. You may hear as we go through this word akshauhini. Akshauhini is the way they measure the different armies. And Krishna had so many akshauhinis, and there's a certain number of infantry and a certain number of cavalry. So there's so many horses, and there's those riding on elephants. There's a certain standard number. And there are thousands of elephants, thousands of horses, and tens of thousands of warriors on the battlefield. And they practically all died except for the Pandavas and a few others. But because Krishna was present there, because of the battle that it was, they were all exalted. They left the bodies, but they achieved a higher plane. In the Bhagavatam, as Prabhupada explains, they got their original forms in the spiritual world. So if you take the long view, you can see that it was very auspicious that the battle took place. So, if there are no questions or comments on this, then Krishna will continue with this in this vein for a few verses. Ata chetvam imam dharmyam sangramam nakarishyasi tatak sadharmam kirtim cha hitva papam avapsyasi. If, however, you do not perform your religious duty of fighting, then you will certainly incur sins for neglecting your duties and thus lose your reputation as a fighter. Arjuna was a famous fighter, and he attained fame by fighting many great demigods, including even Lord Shiva. Interesting. After fighting and defeating Lord Shiva in the dress of a hunter, Lord Shiva was in the dress of a hunter, Arjuna pleased the Lord and received as a reward a weapon called the Pashupata Astra. Everyone knew that he was a great warrior. Even Dronacharya gave him benedictions and awarded him the special weapon by which he could kill even his teacher. That's Dronacharya. So Arjuna, he was credited with so many military certificates from many authorities, including his adoptive father Indra. Okay, we won't get into that. Including his father Indra, the heavenly king. But if he abandoned the battle, not only would he neglect his specific duty as a kṣatriya, but he would lose all his fame and good name, and thus prepare his royal road to hell. In other words, he would go to hell not by fighting, but by withdrawing from the battle. So, I'm sorry? I'm sorry? Yeah, Shivaratri. Yeah, he come into the discussion here. So again, he would incur sin for neglecting his duty and thus lose his reputation as a fighter. So here we have three things. Now I mentioned last night about this verse in the 5th chapter of the Bhagavatam, first canto. Chaktva swadharmam chadanam bhajang hare bhajan apakvo tapateta toyidi yatra pravabhadram abudamushikim kovarta apto abhajatam swadharmataha. So there, Narada Muni is saying to Vyasadeva that if someone gives up his swadharma, which is what Arjuna is trying to do, and takes up bhajan to Krishna, chadanam bhajang hare, of Hari, and serve the Lotus feet with full enthusiasm, but somehow doesn't complete the course, falls away, where is there anything inauspicious? Because as we know right from the 2nd chapter, coming a verse in maybe next week, in this endeavor, there's no loss and there's no diminution. Now you can only say that about spiritual endeavor, because anything material, there's ultimately complete loss and total diminution. But because spiritual assets are accrued in for the spirit soul, the spirit soul does not die, does not change, then even after death, Prabhupada said, well, you'll begin, where you left off. And Krishna says the same thing in the 6th chapter. So, but here we find that Krishna is encouraging Arjuna to perform his Swadharma. Now, anyone with a little intelligence can see that yes, because Arjuna performing his Swadharma was devotional service in this case. It's not that he'd give up the Dharma and perform devotional service. Krishna wanted him to fight. That means that was the best service he could do. So in his case, his actual following of Swadharma was the best thing he could do, both materially and spiritually. Let's put it that way. So Krishna is systematically defeating all his arguments, on the material side, and the spiritual side, of course, that will be as we continue through here. So now he's going to say what happens if he gives up, how painful it will be. Akirtim chapi bhutani katayashyanti te vyayam sambhavitatsa chakirti madanad adirichyate. People will always speak of your infamy, and for a respectable person, dishonor is worse than death. Purport. Both as friend and philosopher to Arjuna, Lord Krishna now gives his final judgment regarding Arjuna's refusal to fight. The Lord says, Arjuna, if you leave the battlefield before the battle even begins, people will call you a coward. And if you think that people may call you bad names, but that you will save your life by fleeing the battlefield, then my advice is that you'll do better to die in the battle. For a respectable man like you, ill fame is worse than death. So you should not flee for fear of your life, better to die in the battle. That will save you from the ill fame of misusing my friendship and from losing your prestige in society. So the final judgment of the Lord was for Arjuna to die in the battle and not withdraw. So he's giving all of the material downsides of his leaving the battle. In other words, you won't even want to live anymore if from coming, the most exalted fighter in the world practically, having conquered Shiva and gotten so many weapons and so many certificates of merit, suddenly you're leaving the battlefield at the critical moment, the most important battle you fought, and you're leaving. These fine sentiments that you have to avoid killing your grandfather and your guru, no one will think about that. They'll just think, Arjuna left the battle, and he's afraid out of cowardice, which would be worse than death for him. For a respectable person means an honored warrior. That's his badge of honor. The real kṣatriya is not afraid of dying, because he knows that because he's following the Dharma, that either, as Krishna will say explicitly, either you prevail and enjoy the kingdom, or you kill and you go to heaven. Win-win, you see? But Arjuna's idea was lose-lose. Okay, now he makes it very explicit, text 35. Bayad ranad upadatam Mangsante tvam maharataha yesham chatvam bahumato bhutvaya sasilaghavam. The great generals who have highly esteemed your name and fame will think that you have left the battlefield out of fear only, and thus they will consider you insignificant. Purport. Lord Krishna continued to give his verdict to Arjuna. Do not think that the great generals like Duryodhana, Karna, and other contemporaries will think that you have left the battlefield out of compassion for your brothers and grandfather. They will think that you've left out of fear for your life, and thus their high estimation of your personality will go to hell. Avachabadam shabahun vadishyanti tabahitaha nindantastav samartyam tato dukkataram nukim. Your enemies will describe you in many unkind words and scorn your ability. What could be more painful for you? Purport. Lord Krishna was astonished in the beginning at Arjuna's uncalled for plea for compassion, and he described his compassion as befitting the non-Aryans. Now, in so many ways, he has proved his statements against Arjuna's so-called compassion. Now, here's like a standard encouragement for kṣatriyas if they're getting cold feet in any battle. And this is what let me just put on my, it's great. We had, I had 4 layers before. Now I just have this one shirt, and it's nice and climate control in here, but it's a little cool, which is pleasant actually.
Hare Krishna,
Let's
Prabhu.
put this on.
Prabhu,
Haribo.
like what's the name of your name, Prabhu? Dravida Prabhu.
What is?
The meaning of your name.
Oh, the meaning. Well, it doesn't have too much meaning. Rather, there's 2 things. One is a name of, as you well know, South India, 5 provinces in South India, where so many acharyas appeared. But it's also a name of one of Krishna's sons by Jambavati. So that's my name. Prabhupada actually had two disciples named Dravida. He had an earlier one who became a sannyasi and became Pancha Dravida. And when he was still Dravida, he was spoken of in that book by Giriraj Swami, I'll Build You a Temple, described how he was collecting in Bombay in the early 70s. And Bhadran Ryan Maharaj said, I didn't know this other part of your pastimes, Dravida. Could you explain? They no, that's the other Dravida. But I did appear in the book later when I went to Bombay. Actually, I was there in Vrindavan right after Prabhupada disappeared. And I was on assignment from the BTG. I was working for the Bhakti Guided magazine. And so first we went to Mayapur, and we put the pushpa, the flowers that were on Prabhupada's body in the ground, and on that was erected the Pushpa Samadhi, the fabulous Pushpa Samadhi. Maybe some have seen it. And then I went to Bombay to see the temple that was almost opened and is about to open in early '78. And I interviewed Giriraj Swami and others there, and he remembered me. And I wrote an article, and he quoted from that article. So I was there. It's a little confusing because it's not clear the other Dravidas, Anyway, so much for that. Okay. Did I read 36? I think I did. Hatova, that's the one. 37. Hatova prapsasi swargam. Jitvava bhokshase mahim. Tasmarutishta kaunteya. Yudhaya kutanishtayaha. O son of Kunti, either you will be killed on the battlefield and attain the heavenly planets, or you will conquer and enjoy the earthly kingdom. Therefore get up with determination and fight. Purport. Even though there was no certainty of victory for Arjuna's side, he still had to fight, for even being killed there, he could be elevated into the heavenly planets. Now that was like the little interlude of this standard kṣatriya talk, and he's, and now he's going back to a different lesson. Sukha dukkhe same kritva labha labha jaya jayo tato yudhaya yujyasva naivam papam avapsasi. Do thou fight for the sake of fighting, without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat. And by so doing, you shall never incur sin. Purport. Lord Krishna now directly says that Arjuna should fight for the sake of fighting because he, Krishna, desires the battle. There is no consideration of happiness or distress, profit or loss, victory or defeat in the activities of Krishna consciousness. That everything should be performed for the sake of Krishna is transcendental consciousness, so there is no reaction to material activities. He who acts for his own sense gratification, either in goodness or in passion, is subject to the reaction, good or bad. But he who has completely surrendered himself in the activities of Krishna consciousness is no longer obliged to anyone, nor is he a debtor to anyone, as one is in the ordinary course of activities. It is said, I'll say you say, Devarshi Bhutapta Nrinam Pitrinam Nakinkaro Nayam Hrinicha Rajan Sarvatmana Yakshadanang Shadanyam Gato Mukundam Paririttikartam. Anyone who has completely surrendered unto Krishna, Mukunda, giving up all other duties, is no longer a debtor, nor is he obliged to anyone, not the demigods, nor the sages, nor the people in general, nor kinsmen, nor humanity, nor forefathers. Bhagavatam 11:5-41. That is the indirect hint given by Krishna to Arjuna in this verse, and the matter will be more clearly explained in the following verses. So now he's reintroduced this concept of sin and piety, the papa and punya. So here he's saying that if you simply fight for the sake of fighting, meaning not just for the sake of fighting, but indifferent to success or failure, simply you try your best for the service of Krishna, and that effort itself is perfection. You're not so much concerned with the result. It's in Krishna's hands. And in that mentality, there's absolutely no sin that's incurred, because you're doing it on Krishna's behalf, and this is what he wants. So that's what he's coming to now, into this more, I don't know what you say, transcendental, or this is really the theme of the Bhagavad Gita, that Arjuna should simply take the role as an agent of Krishna. Nivrittamatam bhavasavyasacha. And this is a line from the 11th chapter. That, my dear Arjuna, so he already revealed to Arjuna in the 11th chapter, early in the 11th chapter, how all his soldiers are being killed on both sides. As time, this enormous, frightening figure, is actually devouring them. They're perishing within his teeth. And so that's what the material nature is, is that it's annihilating everyone. It's a complete illusion to think that we can survive and prosper and have peace and happiness on the material plane. So the larger perspective of this battle was part of Krishna's pastimes to reinstitute Dharma, yadai dharma saglana bhavata bharata, and that Arjuna was part of that plan, but it would happen anyway, because it's Krishna's will. What is that word? Satya sankalpa. That his will is carried out, always. And if we align ourselves with his will, then we'll be successful in our endeavors. And so the real devotee, just like Srila Prabhupada personified this, is that if you read his biography, I highly recommend it. The best is this Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. There's a whole volume in there, A Lifetime in Preparation, the first volume. I don't know if you've seen. And you read, there's so many difficulties in trying to preach in India. Prabhupada was more and more involved in the mission of the Gaudiya Math, and he was taking on so much responsibility, but at the same time he had his family, which he wanted to be responsible for, and he had his business, But after a certain point, it was impossible to do both. The family was not into it, and it was an impediment, the whole business, so he gave it up. He took Pranaprastha for a few years, then sannyas. And then, he was free to preach, and he got the Jhansi facility, which was a League of Devotees. And many of the principles that he enunciated there were later incorporated into ISKCON. And he was, he was happy doing that. He made a disciple, his first disciple, Acharya Prabhakar, who was a Sanskrit scholar. And, but it didn't work out. This is the theme. It didn't work out. The building was taken away from him. He never really had the deed of the building, if you know the history. And then he was on his own, and then he eventually went to Vrindavan. And he was always writing, that his spiritual master told him, preach in English. So he had this Back to Godhead magazine that he put out in English. It was really just a paper, but it was full of his transcendental writings. The first issue also had much in the war. The World War II was still going on, 1944. That was the first issue. And there were guest articles and all kinds of stuff. So he was doing it, But one after another, there was all these impediments. And he just couldn't, because in India, it's like they figured they knew so much of this already. In other words, we know the Bhagavad Gita. I've read it for years, So finally, he said, well, I might as well try to hunt the rhinoceros. If you come back with a rhinoceros, it's amazing. If you don't, well, it's so difficult anyway. So so he gets on this boat, which is just incredible. And it's so many health difficulties, the story. And even after starting ISKCON, there's so many different challenges, But it was all part of his surrender to Krishna. And it's very significant instruction by Bhaktivinoda Thakur that the difficulties I encounter in your service are the source of nectar for me. Whereas if you're doing something material and the difficulty comes, you become discouraged, or you say, "Why is this happening? Why is God doing this to me?" And because you're the beneficiary, and if you don't see success, then you become disappointed and like that. So this is the sukha dukkha samakritva. If you recall, this tolerance, matta sparshita kaunteya, shitoshna sukha dukkha da, that by the nature of the material world, sometimes things happen that are pleasant, sometimes things happen that are not. It's just the way it is. So by being same, by being dhira, by being equipoised, amid these two things, you are on a platform of developing your Krishna consciousness. Seeing the dualities of this world as ever-changing and not really affecting your real self. If you're determined to serve Krishna in any circumstance, even when the most difficult material circumstance, you can still remember him. You can still cry out. You can still chant, because that's the basic field of your life. It's a different platform of activity. So he's coming from, Krishna's now finished with the little interlude, and now he's coming to this labha, jaya, whether you attain or don't attain, you conquer or are defeated, you remain the same, because you've given up your independent agency. That's the whole idea. Now this verse here, Prabhupada would quote a lot. Devashi bhutapta rinam pratina. It's about being a debtor. We don't recognize that, because we're so fallen in this age, especially in the West. But there's a list here. Deva, the rishis, bhutas, aptas, and the people in general, the forefathers, the servants. So first we're indebted to the devas. How are we indebted? Don't we enjoy the sunshine? Does anyone benefit from the sunshine? Yes, everyone needs it, to grow the plants, and obviously. So there's a deva there. There's a Surya Dev. There's someone in charge. There's a god of the waters, god of the air, god of the sun, and all these different things. These are essential for life. Nature is simply a manifestation of Krishna's external energy, but it's under the control of all of these agents of Krishna. So we're debtors as soon as we just take birth here. But the verse is about not being a debtor. Na kinkaro, nayam rini. Rini means debtors. You're a debtor, O king. Sarvatmana yak sharanam sharanyam. If one's full soul, body, soul, mind, and everything, one takes shelter of him who is worthy of taking shelter, Krishna, Mukunda, then pariditya kartam. You've given up the sense of a separate agency. In other words, you're now simply doing Krishna's will. And so it's just like consolidating all the credit. You have a bunch of debts, right? In your credit cards, and so you'd consolidate it, and you pay one payment per month, and the creditors don't come after you, right? Because it's being taken care of. So that's the idea, is that if we become servants of Krishna, then we don't owe anything to the sun, because the sun is also a servant of Krishna, and we're under Krishna's protection. So that's a very important concept, because otherwise, we are beholden. We don't recognize that, but then what happens is what you see around us, that nature becomes inimical. All of this climate change and these things that are going on is practically, we're destroying our own habitat, the human beings. Because we're not living simply, we keep exploiting in this unnatural way, the fossil fuels and everything, I mean, yeah, I drive a car about 10 miles a month, it's a gas guzzler. I'll fill up the car about once every 3 months. These days I'm just driving to Sprouts, that's 2 blocks. Then I drive to Traders, that's about 4 blocks. And then back to Ralph's, and I'm done. $24 a month insurance. So, but still, when you multiply by millions and millions of people, it's artificial, and it's amazing, because we know this now for many years, right? But everyone's so addicted to this form, and the people who are running things are not thinking of the long-term future. They're not thinking of their grandchildren. They're thinking, well, this is how I live. This is. But if millions and millions and millions of people live in this artificial way, the environment cannot, withstand it. The demigods are angry. You can look at it that way. So Krishna consciousness means, the Prabhupada gave this form, as simple living, high thinking. You can be satisfied with simple living if you think high, meaning that you're always thinking of the highest, Krishna. You can be satisfied with much less than you think you need, and live naturally, and in harmony with the nature, with Krishna. But it can't be done unless you're Krishna conscious and getting that higher taste, become dissatisfied. You see, that's the key. Okay, let us continue. This is a comment or question. Yes, please.
I think you might have heard this question before, but like here, Krishna is telling Arjun, like, what is his will? Like, he wants Arjun to fight, and he was giving all these points and all. So for us now, like in daily activities,
did you say for us now in this age? Yeah.
Yeah. So we, like, other than the activities at the temple, like we do many activities like job or something like that. So how do we know, like, is Krishna happy with my activities other than like what's happening temple in presence of Vaishnava?
Well, I've gotten this question for a variety of it, thousands of times. First of all, one has to be familiar with the standards, of how to live out there, because you have so many options. You can walk into Ralph's and you can buy anything you want, as long as your credit card is good, But if you realize, oh, I can't touch that, that's forbidden, that's forbidden, that's sinful, because you have knowledge. So that in itself is devotional service, discriminating in your eating and in different aspects of your life, so that they're in tune with the lifestyle that's conducive to elevating your consciousness. And so there has to be a way to find how to do that, even in your regular life. Your apartment or your house, this is where you're the boss. You can put any sound up there, you can put anything on the walls, you can eat anything you want. But if you're Krishna conscious, say, no, I can't, because I'm trying to develop this, and therefore I have a relationship with with Srila Prabhupada, with the books, with Krishna, and there are distinct boundaries that I didn't know existed before, and therefore I want to at every moment remember Krishna, remember the philosophy, and therefore I have to do this, not that, do this, not that, like that. So therefore in your daily life you can do it. And then practically speaking, when you do your work, then there's a fruit, some paycheck. So as much as possible, you help with the preaching effort, to give others Krishna consciousness. This is the practical way. And a big thing is the environment in the home, so that it uplifts you when you come. Oh, there's the room where I have my deities, or I have my altar, and everything there is even, reminds me of Krishna. I go there and that's where I chant my rounds. So we have so much freedom in our life that we can do. Now, of course, we have certain commitments, family commitments we have to meet, and job commitments. But how we spend our so-called free time, what we read, what we hear, what we see, what we eat, this is how we can do the Krishna conscious thing. And so you'll find there are many people living outside who have jobs, who are Krishna conscious. And then, there are times of free time, there's a weekend or even a vacation sometimes. And then you can, go on a pilgrimage. You can go to some temple you haven't been to, a festival, and get a real shot of Krishna consciousness. So that's how you can maintain Krishna consciousness and advance. It's admittedly more difficult if you have these family commitments and so forth, but it is possible, and there's a way of doing it. And you can't do that if you want to do the 6th chapter, Dhyana Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga. No. You got to go alone, and sit in a lonely place. And so even Arjuna said, I can't do this. But we can do Krishna consciousness. It's made for us, Lord Chaitanya. All right, text 39. Now, here comes, really he's changing gears now. Eshate bihita sankye buddhi yoge tvimam shvinu buddhya yukto yaya parta karma bandham prahasyasi. Thus far I have described this knowledge to you through analytical study. Now, that's the 20 verses on the soul, from 11 through 30. That's the analysis. Now listen as I explain it in terms of working without fruitive results. O son of Pritha, when you act in such knowledge, you can free yourself from the bondage of work. So this is like karma yoga. This is Krishna consciousness, but it's basically with trying to break free from the bonds of your karma. According to the Nirukti, or the Vedic dictionary, Sankhya, now you got to watch your diacritics here. You have Sankhya and Sankhya. Notice it. Sankhya means that which describes things in detail, and Sankhya refers to that philosophy which describes the real nature of the soul. And yoga involves controlling the senses. Arjuna's proposal not to fight was based on sense gratification. Okay. Forgetting his prime duty, he wanted to cease fighting, because he thought that by not killing his relatives and kinsmen, he would be happier than by enjoying the kingdom after conquering his cousins and brothers, the sons of Dhritarashtra. In both ways, the basic principles were for sense gratification. Happiness derived from conquering them and happiness derived from seeing kinsmen alive are both on the basis of personal sense gratification, even at a sacrifice of wisdom and duty. Krishna, therefore, wanted to explain to Arjuna that by killing the body of the grandfather, he would not be killing the soul proper. And Krishna explained that all individual persons, including the Lord himself, are eternal individuals. They were individuals in the past, they are individuals in the present, and they will continue to remain individuals in the future, because all of us are individual souls eternally. So this is harking all the way back to Natvevaham Jatanasam, the second verse he spoke, number 12 in this chapter. We simply change our bodily dress in different manners, but actually we keep our individuality even after liberation from the bondage of material dress. An analytical study of the soul and the body has been very graphically explained by Lord Krishna. And this descriptive knowledge of the soul and the body from different angles of vision has been described here as Sankhya in terms of the Nirukti dictionary. This Sankhya has nothing to do with the Sankhya philosophy of the atheist Kapila. Long before the impostor Kapila's Sankhya, the Sankhya philosophy was expounded in the Srimad Bhagavatam by the true Lord Kapila, the incarnation of Lord Krishna, who explained it to his mother, Devahuti. It is clearly explained by him that the Purusha, or the Supreme Lord, is active and that he creates by looking over the Prakriti. This is accepted in the Vedas and in the Gita. The description in the Vedas indicates that the Lord glanced over the Prakriti, or nature, and impregnated it with atomic individual souls. All these individuals are working in the material world for sense gratification, and under the spell of material energy, they are thinking of being enjoyers. This mentality is dragged to the last point of liberation when the living entity wants to become one with the Lord. This is the last snare of Maya, or sense gratificatory illusion. And it is only after many, many births of such sense gratificatory activities that a great soul surrenders unto Vasudeva, Lord Krishna, thereby fulfilling the search after the ultimate truth. Excuse me. Arjuna has already accepted Krishna as his spiritual master by surrendering himself unto him. Shishyaste hang shariman tvam papannam. Consequently, Krishna will now tell him about the working process in Buddhi Yoga, or Karma Yoga, or in other words, the practice of devotional service only for the sense gratification of the Lord. This Buddhi Yoga is clearly explained in chapter 10, verse 10, as being direct communion with the Lord, who is sitting as Paramatma in everyone's heart. That's his famous Tesham Satitayuktanam Vajatam Priti Purvakam Dadami Buddhi Yogantam Yena Mamapiyantite. But such communion does not take place without devotional service. One who is therefore situated in devotional or transcendental loving service to the Lord, or in other words, in Krishna consciousness, attains to this stage of Buddhi Yoga by the special grace of the Lord. The Lord says, therefore, that only to those who are always engaged in devotional service out of transcendental love does He award the pure knowledge of devotion in love. In that way, the devotee can reach Him easily in the ever-blissful kingdom of God. Thus, the Buddhi Yoga mentioned in this verse is the devotional service of the Lord, and the word Sankhya mentioned herein has nothing to do with the atheistic Sankhya Yoga enunciated by the impostor Kapila. One should not, therefore, misunderstand that the Sankhya Yoga mentioned herein has any connection with the atheistic Sankhya. Nor did that philosophy have any influence during that time, nor would Lord Krishna care to mention such godless philosophical speculations. Real Sankhya philosophy is described by Lord Kapila in the Srimad Bhagavatam. But even that Sankhya has nothing to do with the current topics. Here, Sankhya means analytical description of the body and the soul. Lord Krishna made an analytical description of the soul just to bring Arjuna to the point of Buddhi Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. Therefore, Lord Krishna's Sankhya and Lord Kapila's Sankhya, as described in the Bhagavatam, are one and the same. They are all Bhakti Yoga. Lord Krishna said, therefore, that only the less intelligent class of men make a distinction between Sankhya Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. Sankhya Yoga pritag bala pravadantina pandita. Of course, atheistic Sankhya Yoga has nothing to do with Bhakti Yoga, yet the unintelligent claim that the atheistic Sankhya Yoga is referred to in the Bhagavad Gita. One should therefore understand that Buddhi Yoga means to work in Krishna consciousness in the full bliss and knowledge of devotional service. One who works for the satisfaction of the Lord only, however difficult such work may be, is working under the principles of Buddhi Yoga and finds himself always in transcendental bliss. By such transcendental engagement, one achieves all transcendental understanding automatically by the grace of the Lord, and thus his liberation is complete in itself, without his making extraneous endeavors to acquire knowledge. There is much difference between work in Krishna consciousness and work for fruitive results, especially in the matter of sense gratification for achieving results in terms of family or material happiness. Buddhi Yoga is therefore the transcendental quality of the work that we perform. So, Prabhupada has quite lengthily expounded on that verse. So, Buddhi Yoga, when I think of this Buddhi Yoga, I think of that verse, Tesam Sadayuktanam, which we can go over. But also in the 6th chapter, there's a section there, let's see, I think it's 6:20 to 23, where Krishna describes Samadhi, the yogi in Samadhi. Yeah, 6:20 to 23. And Krishna refers to the Buddhi there. This perfection is characterized, the perfection of Samadhi and Yoga, is characterized by one's ability to see the self, and this is the supreme self, the super self, or the super soul, Krishna, in the heart, by the pure mind, and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Now, when you look at the Sanskrit, what will you find? You find Sukham atyantikam yatad buddhi grayam atindriyam. That word buddhi is there. You see that? Buddhi grayam means accessible by intelligence, transcendental intelligence. Atindriya means beyond the restrictions of the senses. So this is, of course, describing the yogi in samadhi. So the senses are, still, and it's all having to do with the mind and the intelligence. And then when he realizes the Lord in the heart, he's enjoying this supreme happiness by transcendental senses, controlled by this transcendentalized buddhi. The buddhi is key. And the reason why I bring that up is because buddhi yoga is always, how does that compute? Are we linking our intelligence to Krishna? And indeed, that is one of the things that you discover, is that the intelligence is the place of memory, and it's a place of will, and it's what we're really working on when we practice Krishna consciousness. You're purifying by hearing Bhagavad Gita, and especially by putting into practice what you hear in Bhagavad Gita. The intelligence becomes stronger and stronger so that it can control the lower self. You remember in the end of the 3rd chapter, we're going to read shortly, the 3rd chapter. There's this whole question that Arjuna has, what forces one to act against his own best interest? What is that? And Krishna answers, kama. It's this strong desire for sex life, but it's anything else, any other strong desire is part of kama, which then devolves into anger, and which covers your intelligence. Avatam jnanametina, covers your knowledge, covers your intelligence. So in the beginning, you have to control the senses. Now, there's 2 things when you say control the senses. One is stop. Don't do that. Don't do that. But you can only do that so long, because the senses have been habituated since time immemorial to enjoy. So therefore, through the intelligence, one directs the senses to act for Krishna, and in this way to become purified, so that you can experience transcendental happiness through these very senses. Just like the tongue. Probably, it's a genius. Lord Chaitanya's form of preaching to the mass. Kirtan, 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 prasadam. He didn't sit there and say, okay, now we're going to have a 2-hour lecture. You won't read that in the CC. He had those discussions with his intimates, so much philosophical. But with the mass preaching, it was kirtan, 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 and prasadam. And after prasadam, a little rest, and then more kirtan. So the idea is, and that's, you receive God consciousness through that? You said, yes, perfection. It's such a powerful process. By kirtan, it engages the whole body. The senses are engaged by the hearing, you're seeing, the body is certainly engaged, the active senses. Everything's becoming purified very powerfully. We need that in this age because it's so contaminated. So by strengthening the intelligence, I come back again to that verse where it says, Kamadinam katina katita palita durni deshas. That Lord Chaitanya is teaching Sanatan, and he quotes this verse that by some tokens, I think Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said he's written by Madhavendra Puri. But he says, in so many ways, I've obeyed these wicked demands of kama, etc. Krodha, lobha, matsarya, envy. And they've shown me no mercy. They're never satisfied with my demand, life after life. And I've been suffering in their service. But now, because my intelligence is strengthened, I've gotten it back. I'm now controlling those. I refuse to serve those bad masters, but I need a service. So I'm approaching you, my Lord, O center of fearlessness, source of fearlessness, and let me serve you. This is such a significant verse, because by the intelligence, it's strengthened by hearing, it's strengthened by chanting, and it's strengthened by the holy name. All of these practices strengthen the intelligence, but especially the study of the Shastra, in the association of devotees and hearing pure devotee. So that's Buddhi Yoga. When remembering Krishna, using your intelligence to perform activities for Krishna, but that's why it's Bhakti Yoga. Buddhi Yoga is Bhakti Yoga. You can't have Bhakti Yoga without strengthening your intelligence and purifying it, and increasing your remembrance of Krishna and his order. So that's what Krishna is going to explain now, Buddhi Yoga, and we'll find as we go on in days to come that this is nothing but Bhakti Yoga that he's going to describe. Okay, we've kind of come to the end of our period. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol. Thank you for listening.